if you're a health of a life coach who's thinking about pivoting your niche, but you're not sure how to do it without losing all of your clients and going crazy, then today's episode of the Wholehearted Business Show is for you. We're going to explore the different ways that you can pivot, whether or not you're pivoting for the right reason, and how to do it so that it's really successful in your coaching business. Let's dive in. Hi there, welcome to the Wholehearted Business Show. I'm Laura. I help heart-centered and highly sensitive health and life coaches get more clients, grow their businesses, and live the best lives while they do it. And today on the show, we're talking all about pivoting your niche. Now, this is a juicy topic, and I like to talk about this stuff, especially for us heart-centered and highly sensitive types who can often tend to be a little bit multi-passionate, shall we say. Now, I have gone through a process of changing niches, and again, we're going to talk about it because I think we often talk about pivoting our niche, but there's variations of what that looks like, and there's pros and cons to what that looks like. We're going to explore the whole topic of that today. If you are someone who is in this space where you're not sure if your current niche is working, you're not sure if you need to pivot, and you need some advice and support around that, again, I do offer one-to-one mentoring and coaching. Please do reach out. We can have a one-off session, or we can look at a package of support that's going to help you in your coaching business so that you can come out the other side stronger, with a higher chance of getting more clients, making more money, all that good stuff. So do check out the link in the description if you want to get in touch and explore working together one-to-one. So before we actually get into the process of looking at a pivot and what that looks like and how that can work, we need to be really honest about why it is that we think we need to pivot our niche, or actually if a pivot is what we actually need to do. So what I find in my experience, I've been working with health and life coaches now for over 10 years, is that what a lot of people do is that they will think that they need to pivot or re-niche because the business isn't working. And what I will say is that more often than not, it's not necessarily a niche problem that is the reason that the business isn't working. It is often a marketing or sales issue or even a messaging issue that is the problem rather than the niche itself. So I think it's really important, and this is why I mentioned reaching out and working with me one-to-one if you want to, because this can be a very costly mistake to make, because what tends to happen is people then spend a lot of energy on the niche pivot or the re-niche. They confuse their audience, they get overwhelmed, and the effort that they could be putting into actually doing something that will get clients then goes into the re-niche or the pivot, and they're still at square one. So we need to be really honest about why we want to approach that. And there's lots of different reasons why we might want to pivot. And one of them is legitimate to think that if I'm not getting clients right now, is it the niche? And that is, it is a thing that it can be. But like I say, often it's not the only thing or is the actual thing. So this is why I really do recommend working with someone, having a conversation with someone, because this is quite a big thing to go through. So you really need to think about that. But again, because we are highly sensitive and heart-centered, we might want to pivot because our interests have changed. We might want to change because our scope of practice needs to be different. And again, I think this is where we've got to think about, there's lots of different variations of how much of a change in the niche we actually want to go through. And it can be as simple as actually like just focusing in more closely on a specific part of our niche. So it can be a focusing, and often that comes with a re-messaging element. It can be that there's a pivot, so we're pivoting from one element of our niche into a slightly different element, but again within the same kind of universe. We're just switching, and that is a true pivot to me. It's okay, I'm not going to talk about hormones for fertility anymore. I'm going to talk about hormones for perimenopause. To me, that is a pivot. Then you've got the full re-niche, which is basically, I am not going to talk about career anymore, and I'm actually going to talk about divorce. Completely different niche. All of those things are valid. And what I would say is that the approach for each of those is going to have to be different. And that's why we need to know what degree of change we are making, and also how far into our business that we are, because the issue with a change in niche, depending on how dramatic it is, really comes down to how much you're going to have to work to make that niche change work. Now, on the furthest end of it, where it's a complete re-niche and it's a complete change, you're probably going to have to build a new audience, because there's not going to be that many people going to come over from your existing audience into this new one, because it's a different group of people with a different set of problems. It's a completely different thing. With the pivot, again, maybe that example of the pivot from hormones for fertility to hormones for perimenopause, There's still a bit of a shift in audience, but again, there's a continuation, because there's a potential that people who've maybe engaged with your content around fertility are at an age now where they're starting to go through perimenopause, or are starting, and perimenopause symptoms can start at 35, but they'll still be relevant to some people in your audience, so you can go through that. Then with the kind of focusing in, that's a much easier one to do, because really what you're doing is you're just focusing on a more specific part of the niche, and that just comes with a bit of remessaging. Again, the degrees of this and how intense it's going to be on your business does matter. So it's really worth taking into consideration which of those three things you're actually looking at when you're talking about pivoting. Because again, I think people talk about pivoting your niche as a catch-all, and that's not actually what it is. There's degrees of it, and I think it's really important to understand what those things are and what is driving it. Because again, if you are wanting to completely switch your niche because you're not interested in the topic that you're talking about, and being interested and excited about the nature of your work and what it is that you help people with is really fucking important. And if you are not excited and interested in what it is that you're doing, yes, re-niche, absolutely, because it drives us. This coaching business thing is not easy, and you need to have that passion somewhere for you to talk about what it is that you're going to talk about in your content and then you work with people. So don't be afraid. Like, you know, yes, it's going to be a big shift to your business, but I really think you need to have that passion underneath what it is that you're talking about to make a business work. There's all sorts of reasons. But again, if it's more like something doesn't feel right about what I'm talking about, or it's not landing for people, then that kind of more focused niche could be a really good thing to think about. Or again, it might be just like, actually, I need to just make a switch over somewhere, and that's more of the pivot. So examining what that is, really looking at the motivation, being really honest about the motivation behind it is really helpful, because it will stop you from making the same mistakes potentially further down the line, even when you have just gone through the re-niche. Let's talk about what happens if you do decide that you want to do one of those three things. And I think really what is helpful at any stage of this, and again, any degree of niching, re-niching, pivoting, focusing, is that you are not starting from scratch. And I think that is one of the things that people find really scary, particularly when you're jumping into a whole new niche, is that you feel like you're starting from scratch, but you're not. Yes, it is a bigger job if you're doing a full re-niche, but you are bringing with you your skills, you are bringing with you a lot of your kind of setup, a lot of your tech, you're bringing a lot of stuff already with you, potentially as well. Like again, you might be having to build a new audience, but there still might be crossovers in that audience that will still come with you. So you're never starting from scratch, which is a really comforting thought if it feels like a really big thing, but you're never starting from scratch. And again, if your re-niche, if we're going to that degree, is driven because you need a change because it's not interesting anymore, like it can feel really scary because it feels like you're making this change and it's not, you know, you can almost gaslight yourself into thinking it's not the right reasons to do it, but it really can be, because you need to have that drive. So reminding yourself that you've actually taken a lot with you, no matter how dramatic the niche and the re-niche and pivoting is, can be really useful. And then once you get to that point, it's about thinking actually what needs to change. And again, depending on one of those three options, like if you're just refocusing to a more specific part of your niche, it is about just a re-message. And it might be that you review your website, you go through your offers, you go through your marketing systems and funnels, and you re-message everything. And that can be really straightforward. It will take time, but you can do it. And again, it means that you can do it in stages, because the messaging is never going to feel like completely out of whack because you're still in the same kind of arena. So that's a quite straightforward thing. If you are doing a pivot, so again, the pivot that I described, then again, very similar. You can probably still have all the same branding. You just want to go through your website, look at what it is that you're saying. It is that re-messaging. It is looking through your marketing funnels and things like that. And again, what you might find more so with this option, and you probably would find it with the other one as well, the one I've previously mentioned, is that you might need new offers, you might need new freebies, you might need new low ticket offers to make it make sense. So that can be a really great process to go through. And again, it is going to take time. What I like about these two options is that they are not so dramatic that you can like pace how you're going to do that and sequence out how you're going to make that change. And again, you want to be thinking about how you're communicating this with your existing audience as well, so that it doesn't just hit them cold and they're wondering what the hell's going on there. She was talking about this last week and now she's talking about this. You can gradually change the focus of what you are talking about in your content. For example, if you do regularly create and share content, you can do that over a period of time. So it can be really useful to maybe set like a timeline, like 3 months, as to when you're going to gradually start to switch people over and talk about something new, or again, refocus, whatever that looks like. The difference with a completely new niche is that I think it can make sense, and again, it depends on what you've got set up, to build up what you need in the new niche, and it almost is like a new business, and then start to move over. And what it might be is that you need to keep the existing business around the existing niche going so that you've got the clients and income coming in while you build up the new thing. And this is what happened in my business. So again, this is something that I've gone through. I was a health coach. I worked with women around all sorts of different things: weight loss initially, hormones, self-care, hypothalamic amenorrhea, because that was something that I experienced. So I worked with women across these topics, and I had a very successful blog, very successful health coaching business, and it was amazing, and I loved what I was doing. And I also, at the same time, not at the exact same time, but a few years after I started health coaching, I did start to support other health coaches, because they were coming to me and they were saying, Laura, like, how are you making this work? This is so successful. We're really struggling to get clients. What is it that you're doing that we're not? And also, can you help me with my website, because yours is amazing and you've built it yourself? How did you do that? How did you do all the tech? So I started answering those questions with people. I started working with life coaches as well, because again, B2C space is very similar, and I really enjoyed that work. And what I found was that I had two businesses essentially with two very different niches. So again, developed two things, and I was working in two things. And then when I had my daughter at the very end of 2019, I knew that I was going to have to make a decision, and that I couldn't sustain two businesses in the way that I had been doing. So I decided to let the health coaching go. And I think for me, I had just reached this point where I just felt like I'd put everything out into the world that I needed to put out there around my kind of approach around health and wellbeing and self-care. I just felt like I'd just done it. And actually, I created this course called Wholehearted just as I was like at the last stages of my pregnancy, and I put that out, and I was just so happy with that course. It was a really lovely course, and it really just put out into the world, like, this is, if I want to leave something in this space with these people that I've worked with, all these amazing people that I've worked with, through my group programs, through my courses and memberships that I had around health stuff. I had a program all around mindset. I had a group program. I had all sorts of programs in one-to-one clients around the health and wellness space. And I put this one out, and it just felt, I don't really think there's anything else I can say about this now. I feel like I've just put it all out into the world, and it just felt like a really great time to no longer do that and to move into the business stuff. And that was the shift for me. And again, as someone who is highly sensitive and heart-centered and quite multi-passionate, I think I liked having the two businesses. And even now, I'm actually considering starting something else as well, although my life's probably not in a state to be able to do that right now either. But I think when you're multi-passionate, we get it, don't we, guys? We get that we want to do and talk about lots of different things. So for me, it made sense to do it that way. And again, if you are doing the full re-niche, my suggestion would be to build something up alongside and then do the switch at a time that is right. And again, you will know that it is about, you've got like a powerful pull to do something. And again, I think if it's just about the money and if it's just about worrying that you're not getting clients in an existing niche, it can be very valid. And you know, yes, there are times when actually a completely different niche is going to make sense, but I would absolutely recommend speaking to someone before you do that jump without actually talking to someone who's got experience in these things, because it's quite a significant change in your business, because it is a new audience and it is potentially a new brand, and it's never starting from scratch. But out of all of those three options, that is the most dramatic that you will need to go through. And then you just want to think about it in terms of time. And I mentioned for the kind of focusing and the pivot, you're talking maybe a couple of months to be able to completely put that together, depending on how much time you work in your business anyway. For the completely new niche, I would honestly, this might sound a bit scary, give yourself a year to like wind one thing down and start the other one up. And for me, when I did it with my stuff, I was already running two businesses in my head. They were part of the same limited company, but for me, they were two separate things anyway. And because of that, it wasn't a pivot. I had two separate audiences. I had to segment my email list. Like, it was two very separate things. And I think that allowing one to wind down while one builds up makes absolute sense. And that will take time. So for me, that's about a year. And it is just about accepting that. And again, reminding yourself that you're not starting from scratch. You've got legitimate reasons for wanting to change your niche. Make sure you talk to someone about it. Oh my God, please do. Because you could be making a very expensive time costly mistake. So talk to someone if you are on that boat, and especially if you've got an existing well-generated business, but especially if you've got an existing successful business, like, just talk to someone. So yes, there we have it. There's a bit of a pathway for changing your niche, for pivoting. But again, just to go through those 3 different things to wrap up, I think you're either doing a focusing of your niche, you're doing a pivot, or you're doing a completely re-niching. And again, how much work each of those things take depends on which option you go for. And again, just be clear on the reasons behind it, because changing your niche is not always the answer that we think it's going to be. And I think it's really important to recognise that. Also really important to recognise that you want to change your niche because you are multi-passionate, heart-centred, highly sensitive, and it just feels right to do. That's also valid. But this is why I recommend talking to someone. So do check out the link in my description if you want to work with me one-to-one. Like I said, I do have one-off sessions available if that's useful too. So do get in touch. But there we have it. There is a guide to pivoting your niche, or re-niching, or focusing your niche without going crazy, without losing all your clients, without your business collapsing, without you wasting a lot of time. I hope that has been helpful. Let me know in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. If this has been useful to you, please let me know. If you're listening on the podcast, please pop me a DM on Instagram. I'm at wholeheartedlylaura, and I'll be back next week. You take care. Bye.